Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Just Do You podcast. My name is Eric Nicole, and I'm your host. If you are a first time listener, welcome to the conversation. And if you're a regular, I'm honored that you've decided to join me for another episode. The Just Do You podcast is centered around a network of conversations which are meant to connect us, to inspire us, to find our own confidence, our own voice, and to live our own truth. And who knows, we might even learn a little something new that ultimately allows us to live in the sweet spot that I like to call the just do you space of being. Each week, I have the privilege of sitting down for unscripted conversations with friends, family, colleagues, community leaders, and influencers that all share their own personal journeys. I hope that you enjoy our time together as much as I have. We are certainly going to laugh, and yes, we might even cry a little. But in the end, we're going to know that we're not alone during our life's journey. So, are you ready? Great, let's do this. Welcome to the conversation. All right, everyone, welcome to today's episode. I'm just going to jump right in and introduce my guest. I have been waiting for this conversation for about 6 months, so allow me to introduce my guest today, Nubia Younge. Hi, Nubia.
Hey, what's going on, Eric? I am so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. As I told you before we jumped on, I have been traveling out of the country, thinking fondly of you throughout my travels, which we're going to talk about today. But I was thinking about you and this amazing life that you live and your story and your journey about finding that just do you space of being. So thank you for taking the time and being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our listeners and read a little bit of your bio. I love to do that because I think it's really empowering when you read someone's bio and then you see their reaction to who they are. Because I don't think a lot of times we own truly who we are. We've written the copy, it's up on some website that we rarely look at, and we go through our day. And so I'm always taken back by the responses and the facial expressions of the people that I read their bio. So I'm going to just introduce you for a moment and then we'll get started. So for our listeners, Nubia is the founder and CEO of Black in Travel and Black in Tulum. We met last year at an industry event in Tulum, Mexico, where she spoke on a panel with an amazing and extraordinary woman who was also a guest on this podcast. And I was really taken back by the conversation that we had. But Nubia is a mom. She's a global traveler. She's an entrepreneur who's dedicated to helping women rewrite their stories and to reclaim their power and to boldly step into what she calls their more. And we're going to talk a lot about that in today's conversation. She's built a life that she says is worth living, which I think we all need to do. And it's filled with unforgettable adventures, meaningful connections, and really bold choices. And her journey proves that freedom and purpose are always possible. Yet I know the journey as a single mom and navigating your life in raising your two children has not been an easy one. And so we're going to talk about that today. So again, welcome to the conversation. It's an honor to have you here. And I'm going to take you back a little bit, Nubia. I'd like to go back and find out a little bit more about the young Nubia. Where were you born? What was your family dynamics like? Only child, siblings, what that young Nubia was like? Because I really believe that sets the tone for our future. And I'm curious to learn a little bit more about you from that perspective.
Wow. So that's a story within itself. But I am the only child, and I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. My father was an absentee dad. He was ex-military and got caught in that opioid situation with the military overseas.
Mhm.
So he was battling his own addictions through my young adulthood and young life. And my mother and I honestly don't have the best relationship. I've always felt different from the family and from her. She was that mother that got a job straight out of high school, 18. She actually retired from the same company.
Wow.
So growing up, here I am working this odd end job or that job. And I don't know if for her it was just a disappointment, but it was just like, why don't you get a job and just that kind of thing? And I'm just like, because I don't like it. I want to do something that makes me happy, or I want to do something where I feel seen. Growing up in Massachusetts, Boston, it's a Commonwealth state. Racism still exists. And I felt I just didn't belong. And then
Mm.
on top of that, I was getting depressed in the winters and I couldn't figure out for what was happening. And I got diagnosed manic depressive in 2000 with SAD, which is
Hmm.
like the winter blues. So gray
Hmm.
skies, all of that stuff kept hovering over me. So I left Boston and moved to Virginia. And that opened up a lot more because I got to see people who were working for the government, people of color who had these jobs that were making six figures, you know what I'm saying? And
Mm.
I wasn't raised like that. So wasn't sure. Everybody that I knew was really just middle class. But moving to DC, I seen upper class Black folks. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I was just, how can I put it? I put my kids in IB schools. I was just, oh my gosh, living in the DMV, as we call it, DC, Maryland, Virginia,
Hmm.
it's just exposed to so much. And no
Hmm.
matter what time of the day, what day of the week, you seen young Black professionals, whether they were in the restaurants, whether they were at some speakeasy or some jazz spot or art thing. And I loved it. And I just immersed myself in that culture where actually I found travel. Traveling for me at that time as a single mom was really about going to New York, going to
Hmm.
Miami, maybe Jamaica. But I didn't have a passport until I turned 32.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Fun.
Wow. Go back for a second because you said something that has me thinking. So, when you were young and not really seeing yourself represented, what was that like? What were the feelings and the thoughts that you had as young Nubia?
I think a lot of times it was sadness because you really can't pinpoint, you didn't have the words, right?
Sure.
And not only am I a dark skinned Black woman, I'm also a dark skinned Black queer woman. You understand what I'm saying? So there were so many levels to things that I just didn't see that looked like
Hmm.
me, sounded like me, or even the mindset of myself. It's just like I knew there was more out there. I just didn't know how to attain it. I knew that
Hmm.
this couldn't be my life. Like this can't be
Hmm.
Boston. It was very just it. And I was just like,
Hmm.
it cannot be my life. I got something different. So Virginia opened up those doors because I started to see others.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just Black people, it was just people of color in general.
I'm obviously not of that same conversation. I grew up in a very cisgendered white upper middle class neighborhood where we didn't have a lot of diversity. And my mother, who was a teacher, made a point to get me down to downtown LA, get me into the parts of Los Angeles where I could see that there was diversity. I could see that there was other nationalities and other backgrounds. And I really praise her for that because she knew that we were very lucky to
Yeah.
live the life that we had and to be raised by a single mom and an amazing grandmother, two of them, and grandfather. But it was a very sheltered life. And conversely, although there was, I guess, what we're now calling privilege, there was this strange sense inside of me that there had to have been more. There had to have been other experiences living in this little walled gated community. And so I think that first time that you see representation of other communities, of other cultures, it really is eye-opening. And it, for some, almost ignites this desire to find more, to see
Yeah.
more. And so when you end up in this place where you're seeing professionals and you're seeing people that are out living and being in their more, as you use the phrase, it's got to be empowering, but also maybe a question of, am I worthy? Am I going to be able to achieve that? Am I able to, it makes me emotional, take what I believe is my God-given birthright and to go for those things. So that's a super powerful transition. And so, what an opportunity. And I say the universe working in your favor because you were given an opportunity and you certainly did take it.
The thing about it is, and I want to pinpoint something that I failed to mention, when I lived in Massachusetts and my family lived in Roxbury, like the city, and I did not see myself wanting to live in the city. I just seen the grit, the grind, all the things. And I was just like, this, I always wanted to live a soft life. One of what some people or the Black culture would think was opulent, right? Because that
Mhm.
wasn't a part of their story. And I ended up, I was on Section 8. Let's just start there,
Hmm.
Section 8. But instead of doing public housing and all of those things, I got a house, like a house in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in
Hmm.
Newton, Massachusetts, the only Black woman on the block. I loved my Jewish neighbors. They would come over and eat things like collard greens and fried chicken, and they would just fall in love. And they loved my kids. And I would take my kids apple picking, and we would make homemade applesauce. Those are the things that you don't see Black families doing. You know what I mean? I was
Hmm.
already putting myself in a position to give myself and my children different experiences from the jump.
Hmm. So, what is it, in your opinion, that has other Black families not experiencing that? What is it, a conversation?
I truly believe back then in the 90s, it was, do will we feel like we belong? Number one, right? Because when I did these things, we were probably the only people of color in those places. I just didn't let that deter me from going. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? And I'm not saying that all Black families don't go out and do things, but the ones that I seen were in the city and they stayed in those 4 blocks, it seemed. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's where they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's where they felt like they could only be. But for
Yeah.
me, I was like, I was that rebel that was like, oh no, this can't, I gotta go. Forget blocks. I'm in a whole nother town. So I did that from the beginning. And that's what I meant about I didn't feel like I belong. I
Hmm.
still don't feel like I belong in a lot of places. I have traveled the world on this pursuit of belonging and happiness. And it wasn't until about 45. I'm 47 in this present moment. And at 45, I'm going through therapy. I'm doing all the things. I have traveled 50 countries. I've lived on 4 continents. I've done all of these things. And it wasn't until then that I realized this pursuit that I've been on was myself. I needed
Hmm.
to find the happiness and that belonging within me. Nothing that I could do or went to, or it was not external. And so that's when I started on my pursuit to self love. A friend asked me a question and she was like, do you love yourself? And the first thing I'm like, what? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But then when I sat with that question, and she said, I'm not talking about superficially, like getting your
Hmm.
hair and nails done and going out and taking trips and doing all this stuff. She goes, honestly, loving yourself, like loving the skin you're in, loving, who you are innately. And I had to sit with that. And I sat with that and I continue to sit with that. And I have to find the things that I want externally within myself first, because it won't be beneficial. Because I have traveled the world, but to be honest with you, a lot of it is a blur at this point.
I don't think we ever get to a point in our lives, and some may disagree with me. I probably failed this on my coaching exam, but I don't think we ever get to a point where we're like, this is it. I love myself wholeheartedly. We are constantly and tirelessly unpacking and unpacking. And then we get something else that gets put in our suitcase and we got to look at that and unpack it. I was unpacking stuff last week as I was walking on the beach by myself one morning at 5:30 in the morning on this glorious, gorgeous morning, unreal, and I'm unpacking stuff from when I was 12. And I thought, this is just the stuff that comes up in our daily lives. In the entrepreneurial world, we are constantly challenged at improvement, getting better, bettering ourselves, bettering our work. And we have to look at ourselves because we're it. We don't rely on a company and executives and support staff for the most part. We are the ones that have to carry that. And so I find that being an entrepreneur almost challenges us even more to continually forge that path of self-care or self-love, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's responsible. So in the bad times, I heap that on me. Oh, maybe it's me, maybe it's me, maybe it's me. So I'm curious. So was this around 2017 that you mentioned in your biography? That change happened when this conversation was happening, or was that earlier?
No, so in 2016, I
Mhm.
was working as an event planner and assistant to the VP of National Security for an aerospace company. And I was doing events all over for these generals and ex-military clients like Boeing and Northrop Grumman. And so I'm just exposed to this whole different world, right? And I'm loving it. And I ended up going back to school because I didn't finish college because I had my children young. So I went to school at 32. And
Mm.
at this point, I was 36, maybe 37. And so I went to school for hospitality management, events. I just loved hospitality. I knew this is my lane, right? And I just knew that this job was going to be it for me. I was like, this is the place that I want to be at. Guess what? They laid me off. And when they laid me off, it was January 2017. And I was like, what the hell? No, it was January 2016 when I got laid off. And I was like, what the heck? You know what I mean? I've been putting in work here for 5 years. Like, I just knew this was it for me. And I got so upset. And I said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not sitting in front of anybody
Mm.
and trying to prove my worth with my resume to say,
Mm.
hire me and pay me equally and fairly, because the reality of the situation was I got laid off, but the girl who came in before, right after me, was straight out of college. Her father knew one of the people, and she became a manager in the same space that I've been working in for 5 years, working my way up, and went back to school for. You hear me?
I do.
That really infuriated me. And I believe that was when the push
Mm.
for that's it. I did something very unconventional to a lot of people. I went through my 401k and withdrew all the money, which
Mm.
was horrible at the time because you get taxed like 35% on your own money. But I took that money out. I took my savings. I had worked up in that job. I worked on my credit. I worked on
Mhm.
savings. I was doing so much. I was doing what people see as the American dream in a sense. You know what I mean? All the things.
Oh
And
yeah.
and that's when I decided to downsize. My oldest was going off to college. I sent her off. And then I looked at my youngest, and he was in high school. He probably had about a year left. And I just said, I'm tired. I'm tired. I was like, I want to leave. I was like, do you want to come with me or no? And he was like, I'm still in school. And I was like, I picked up the phone, called his father, and said, it's your turn. Tag, you're it. I've been doing this all my young adult. Like, I had my first at 18 years old, and she's now going off to college. I did my job. Like, I
Mhm.
can't stay here another year waiting. You know how most people go, oh, wait till the kids are this age or that age. No, I had to do it for me because I felt like I was going to suffocate if I
Mhm.
stayed. So I downsized from our townhouse, and I sent my son, packed him up, sent him to go live with his dad. And I downsized to a 1 bedroom apartment. And yeah, I started to sell things. I started to get rid of things. I had no rhyme or reason. I was just like, I can't do this no more. That's pretty much it. I was like, I can't do this no more. Something's got to give. And I just started doing it. I didn't have any reference. There was no one that looked like me that I knew that lived abroad or packed up their things and left. I did not know anyone. But it wasn't until I went to a psychic my first time, right? And
Me too.
I was that skeptic. I was always skeptic of psychics, but I had
Mm.
a mutual acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, who gave me a referral to a psychic. And then I was like, okay, I hear her. And then I'm getting my hair cut, and I asked my barber, I was like, have you ever been to a psychic? And she was like, yeah, I go to this lady every year. Come to find out
Mhm.
it was the same psychic.
Oh,
Now, I do believe in signs.
yes.
So I took that as a sign, and I went to the psychic and I told her, like, I need to know what my life is going to be like.
Yeah.
And she gave me this beautiful oracle reading, 60 minutes long. And when I tell you, Eric, everything that she had said is coming to fruition or has come to fruition. She was like, I see you traveling. She was like, I can't see a geographical area. She said, but you don't belong here. You're not going to thrive here. She was like, you need to be out in the world and the world will know your name. And I'm being egotistical at the time. I'm like, oh, so you're telling me I'm like an Oprah? He was like, hey, however you look at it, but you are going to leave a legacy that will live on well past your death. And then she said, I'm going to work with kids. She said, I'm going to get married, which I was engaged, but didn't fully get married, but that was on me. She said a lot of things. She said, I'll have a book and I'll have all these things. And then I was like, you know what? It's written. But the thing about it is, when I left, I started sharing my story. I started sharing my story on my Facebook, just taking videos, talking about it, all of those things. And then a friend said, have you ever thought about podcasting? And I was like, what's that? She sent me a couple of links to podcasts. I was like, oh, I love talking. I love that. And so I started Chronicles Abroad with
Mhm.
a friend of mine. And she was also 38, single mom. She went to Thailand but she lived in the South, and I decided to go to Thailand but moved to the North. And we started the podcast together, just sharing our stories. Guess what? We podcasted for 2 years. We got Travel and Leisure, put us as one of the top 10 travel podcasts. You know, we were
Wow.
heard in over 100 countries around the world. We had interviews lined up for so long, and it just went haywire. And it was at that time I didn't know how to monetize a podcast or anything like that, but that's how I started to grow my community.
Mhm.
And from the podcast, that's where the notoriety started coming in. And I started building community in Thailand. And we would do every Sunday, we did dinners for people of color who wanted to come visit Thailand, or for the people who were living in Thailand. And that was beautiful. And each person would host, it was a
Mhm.
rotation. And they still do it to this day.
Mhm.
Somebody posted a picture and it was like, we're in Thailand and we went to Sunday dinner, and I commented and I said, it's so beautiful to see that you guys are still doing this after 7 years of our
Mhm.
first one. And she was like, the first one? I was like, I'm one of the originators of the first one. It's nice to see those things continuing on.
It also shows the power in community. And you talk a lot about that in your bio and in your social media, that community is so important. And we really dismantled community during the pandemic and various other states of affairs in our country here in the US over that time. But we dismantled community. We just obliterated communication and connection and community. That's my opinion, but I really believe that in my heart. And all we are at the core is our journey and our stories. And the reason I started this podcast was because I had gone through a horrific divorce, which of course I just talked about publicly for the first time on a podcast, which airs in a couple of weeks. That should be fun. But I found myself living in a new town,
Yeah.
unhappy and sad and distraught. Pandemic hit. That even closed me in further. And I am a good talker. I love people. I love to connect. I love to tell stories, hear stories. And we just didn't have that. And it took me 2 years to get this podcast launched. I procrastinated. No one's going to listen. There isn't a community out there that's going to this is going to resonate with. And my friend, who's my mentor and fellow podcaster, said, you just got to record the first one. And like you, in doing that first one, here we are 2 seasons later, hoping to get to seven, but 2 seasons later, and the community that we've created, there has been life-changing experiences within those conversations. And why I share that, what I think is so important is that we are all on this earth to be of service to others. And our stories are sometimes that service because someone sitting listening to you, see, I told you I was going to cry, listening to you tell your story is going to potentially be sitting at home or driving in their car on their way to a job they don't like, or feeling lost or feeling unconnected and not knowing how to make that next step. And hearing you say, I started to downsize. I started to sell my things. I knew I couldn't stay here anymore. I didn't know what was next for me. And here's what we started, and here's why I am now. And the thing that's important to remember is that even though you found that courage and you found that tenacity and that more, I'm not going to forget that, it still is challenging. We were sharing about that before we hit record. It doesn't mean that your life is going to be blissfully easy, but what it means is that you're going to be living a life that has purpose, living a life that has meaning. And when you do that, even giving up everything that you gave up and selling everything that you sold, you find this what I call just do you space of being. And so the fact that you're out there doing this now and sharing it with others, and the fact that it took off so exponentially and with such velocity within the Black community is really astounding. So I want to talk a little bit about that if we can. So tell me about the start of this Black in Travel. I'm super curious because, and here's why. We talk about representation and we talk about seeing yourself in other places. And I'm consistently amazed. We sat in this amazing event together in Tulum, Mexico, where we met. I shared this with Zoe. And here are these extraordinary, gifted, talented Black women sitting on stage, sharing these amazing stories and keynote speech to a room full of people that I wasn't quite sure it was actually resonating with them, what it was that you were talking about. And I looked around the room and I thought, with all due respect, this is a room of just gendered white, mostly women. And yet the story was so palpable and powerful. And so I wonder if I could just go there for a second. Did you see that on the other side as well? And what was that like for you?
To be honest with you, I love it. I love it when the room isn't all because I want people like yourself and others to
Exactly.
know that we exist and that we're out there. And to be honest with you, that particular event after the talk, so many people approached,
Hmm.
wow, that's amazing. I didn't know, or that how can we assist in any way. So you create allies, you create relationships, and even though the representation is about people of color, women of color, I am not opposed to opening that up for everyone to know and to
Hmm.
assist wherever they can to
Hmm.
get our voices out there.
It was an amazing event, and I don't mean to share that it wasn't. I think the point was is that, and I said this to you that afternoon when I approached you, is that may not have hit them then in that moment, but I guarantee you they went home and it hit them somewhere down the road.
Oh, it
Not,
hit a lot of them in that
yeah,
moment. That's what I
yeah,
loved about it. It
yeah,
was like,
and exactly. And in that moment, also too, I think it shifted the conversation of our industry,
yeah.
and because that's then going to ripple out, and that's the power of that storytelling, and the fact that there are organizations like Black in Travel and Black in Tulum. Side note, digression. Sorry, I digress. Go back to what had you then. Give me the chronological spot of you being in the U.S. What happened next?
Okay, so 2017, I had my ticket and I went to
Hmm.
Thailand
Hmm.
and I went to Chiang Mai, Thailand. And when I tell you, from the moment I got off of that flight to my hostel, because I decided, so let me just be very clear. When I did my research, right,
Uh-huh.
I watched so many YouTube videos. I Googled as much as I could. I could not, and I repeat, could not find people that looked like me. Everything was young white millennials coming from Australia, coming from here, there, and the other where, just getting out of university, backpacking Southeast Asia, talking about how you can live on $5 a day. And I was just like, if they can do it, I can live off of more than that. I just was just like, these are kids doing it, right?
Mhm.
I went and I decided to rent a hostel for a month. It was $500. And I was like, sold. I walked up to the hostel after getting dropped off by the took, and there were two Black women sitting in front of the hostel. Hi, where are you guys from? They're like, oh, DC. What? Okay. And then the next day, another Black woman walks up with a backpack and she gets a room. And I'm like, hi. And come to find out, she was a woman that another associate told me about that was traveling Southeast Asia. And she just happened to come to Chiang Mai. So I was already getting introduced immediately to women of color. And I was just like, but what, how, that's how I was like stuck. I was like, but where have you guys been? I've been researching you guys. Once I got to Thailand and I started the podcast, I started using them as the people that I was interviewing to
Hmm.
share the stories and using my own story. Then from 2017 to 2018, going into 2019, I was in Asia just traveling and enjoying my space. And every time I seen a person of color across the street or anywhere, I was just like, I was so excited, right? Hi, can we exchange information? How long you been abroad? Just gathering. My friend used to tell me, she was like, you like to collect Black folks. I was like, hey, I know what it felt like to not be or feel like I was seen. I want them to know that I see you. Even if I don't speak, I'm going to give you a head nod. I'm going to give you eye contact. I'm going to give you a smile. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't, that resonates with people no matter what color you are. Feeling seen is just a beautiful feeling. And I'm good with a smile. It's free.
Hmm.
Hello, it's free. None of that stuff cost me anything. So I was going through that journey. And then I was like, I want to try other places. So I moved to Colombia, South America.
Wow.
And I was hit with a lot of microaggressions and a lot of colorism because I lived in Medellin at the time. And when people seen me, they automatically thought I was Afro-Colombian. And most Afro-Colombians are from Choco or Cali. And the way people in Medellin looks at them looks different. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I do. I do.
So I was like, this is not it. I
Hmm.
didn't feel, especially coming from a place like Thailand that's very Buddhist, very land of
Hmm.
smiles. I was like, these are my cousins because in the mountain regions of Thailand, these Thai people had nose that spread. They had darker
Hmm.
complexion. They just looked like we were derivatives of each other somehow, some way. So being in Colombia and being in Medellin, I was like, oh, I don't like this. And so I only stayed about 3, 4 months. I went to Germany to go visit a friend for a month, enjoyed it. But again, it wasn't my place. This is that finding the belonging, right? Then I left and I decided to come to Mexico. And Mexico was not on my list because it's North America and I wanted to be what I call international abroad, like way far. But I was dating somebody in Virginia and they wanted to try their hand at living abroad. So I said, let's do Mexico. It's closer. You won't be too far from family and friends. And they chickened out 4 days before we were supposed to leave.
Oh, oh.
And I landed in Mexico City, June of 2019. So I am coming up on 6 years, June in Mexico. I landed
Wow.
in Mexico City. I was supposed to only stay here 10 days. And then I was going to go back to Asia. I got here, Eric, and fell in love with this city. It was vibrant. It had everything. It the food. I would take the metro, and the metros were like museums. I was like looking at so much cultural things going on, and everything was innately Mexican. So I'm just like, I'm loving this. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. You walk out of the metro, people are dancing bachata and salsa and drums and people with guitar. It was music everywhere. So I extended my stay. What I did know about Mexico City is that we have pretty much 3 seasons. You get what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Spring, summer, and fall for the most part. But fall feels like winter when there's no heated homes are
Hmm.
not central heated. There's no central AC. It's really just concrete. So I'm going to sleep with socks on. I got on sweatshirts and I remind you, I lived in these places where I didn't have to, so I wasn't prepared. So I ended up going to actually a couple of friends came and we traveled. We went to Guatemala, we went to Puerto Escondido, we went to Oaxaca City, Chiapas. We just traveled Mexico. And then we came to Playa del Carmen. And that's where I landed in December of 2019. You hear me? You
I
get it?
hear you. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I'm enjoying the beach and doing all the things. And Long and behold, I had a flight. March 25th, 2020 was my flight to go to Singapore.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
That flight kept getting delayed, canceled. Next thing you know, shut down April 1st.
Mm.
I was quarantined in Playa del Carmen. And I was just like, okay. So what I did was I made the best out of the situation. I had this beautiful condo because everything was dirt cheap. A lot of Canadians own properties in Playa del Carmen. And Canada, Prime Minister was like, either bring your butt back to Canada or you miss out on all the benefits. So Canadians were fleeing back to Canada
Oh,
and
wow.
they were renting their properties for little to nothing. Like I had a 2-bedroom, beautiful condo with an indoor outdoor space, rooftop pool, everything for $800 a month or $750 a month in Playa. Yes,
Wow.
during the pandemic. Chef's kitchen. So I put that kitchen to work. Started cooking and I started taking photos of my food and people would ask me for the recipe. So I created a digital cookbook called Nubia's Nibbles.
I love you. It's just, you,
There's
you
so much
rock my world.
opportunity in
Yeah.
everything that you do. And I was
Yeah.
learning that. And then there was all these places that were giving free courses, free exercise thing. I joined everything that I could for free. Peloton. I got all these. I just taught myself and I was sharing those resources on social media. Like if you're interested in marketing, they're giving marketing certifications with Google Garage or they're doing this, they're doing that. And I was just sharing resources and people were loving it. And I was just
Mhm.
building a better community. Literally was looking to me to be like, what else is going on, Nubia?
What's going on?
What's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. Before you continue this, I want to point something out because it's just literally ringing in my ear. So I want our listeners to understand, they're probably sitting here listening, saying, oh, I could never do that, or I wouldn't have that kind of luck. Even though you did what you did, I believe there was an intentionality in your quest. Even if it was as broad as, I got to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. I'm looking for something better. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z in my life. I'm looking for that more. Sets the intentionality for the universe to listen to you. And what the universe did, in my opinion, is brought you all of those experiences. It brought you those two Black women sitting in front of the hostel, right? It did. And again, my opinion. And what that did was give you the signal or the sign that said, okay, this is what's meant to be. You're in you said Chiang Mai, right? You're in Chiang Mai, which was gorgeous and beautiful, and I didn't want to leave Chiang Mai. And this is where it starts. So intentionality is really important when you're searching and wanting to step into that more that I think you talk about.
But that's with everything you do in life, right?
But I don't think we know that, though. I
Yeah.
think we're designed or destined for a particular life, or it is the way that it is because that's the way that it is. I think that's BS. I call BS on that all the time.
Yeah.
I say
We pivot year to year,
all
month
the time,
all the
all the
time.
time. You have to. And where people get stuck, I've seen this with family and I've seen it with friends. My dad, in particular, smart guy, PhD, two of them, stuck, never pivoted. And he lived a life of regret. And he died frustrated and angry that he didn't do the things that he wanted to do, even though he knew that he had the opportunity and the clearance to do it. And when that happened, and when I heard that story, I promised myself, and I'm guilty of it, I promised myself I was never going to get in that spot. So your intentionality and the pivot is what I think people fear the most because we get comfortable in our
Oh,
circumstances.
absolutely. We don't know what to do because we try to control the outcome. You have to let go of controlling the outcome. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh,
And remind you, everything that I'm telling you was, yes, it all happened, but I did have many of nights where I cried. I had many of times when I questioned, did I do the right thing? You know what I'm saying? Because
mhm.
that's innately who we are as humans. We got to try to figure it out. Remember when I told you that I was told by the psychic that I was working with kids? At that point, I thought she was calling. I was like, BS. That's some, F them kids. No, I'm not working with kids. Being in Thailand, I
Yeah.
worked. No, I didn't work for the first, I didn't have to because I took my 401k out. I had my savings. But yet I'm looking at my bank account. Okay, something got to give. Guess what I ended up doing? Teaching English
Hmm.
online to
Hmm.
Chinese students. It's not something that I wanted to do, but guess what? I was the best at it.
Hmm.
Hi, I'm teacher Nubia. You know what I'm saying? I still did the best that I could. I quit that job June of 2020 because I said, this isn't what I want to do. I did it because I had to. I had to make some money, but I'm going to do something different. I don't know what it's going to be. I started cooking. I thought about that. I thought about different things. Guess what? July of 2020, I decided to host a brunch on the
Hmm.
beaches of Tulum just because Mexico was still allowing us to move around a little bit. And I heard about this place in Tulum. I wanted to go check it out. I went and I seen sprinkles of people of color. And I also knew a couple of influencer friends that lived in Cancun or Playa. So I was just like, you know what? Let's just have an event because, like you said, what we were missing was connection. That event brought 25 people of color from Merida, which is 4 hours away. They drove from Merida,
Wow.
Cancun, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum, 25. And that's where Black in Tulum was born.
What was that like? So, was that the place you sent me to when we were there? I think you mentioned it and we did the walk that day, and I think we went there. It's gorgeous and fun and
Yes.
beautiful. I love Tulum. I fell in love with Tulum. That not necessarily where we were staying. That was beautiful, but it wasn't until we walked into Tulum and we went to that boutique hotel that you shared with us. I was like, "Oh, this is me. This is my
That's
spot."
just one of my vendors.
Uh,
That wasn't there when I started, but yeah,
yeah. So, what was that like when you walked in and saw those 25 people that some had driven 4 hours? I want to know the
it
feeling
was
because here,
beautiful.
right?
It was
Yeah.
just beautiful. Just yesterday, I hung out with six of my friends and we just had a great time. And I literally text them and I said, I had such a great time yesterday, guys. Thank you. Like
Mhm.
connection to me and just being able to, there was no DJ, there was no club. We were just having brunch.
Hanging.
We were breaking bread on the beaches of Tulum. The level of gratitude, I cried almost every single Black and Tulum event for 2 years straight because
I bet.
I just sat back and was like, wow. Now I'm getting emotional again because when I think about it, like I'm going through my own ebbs and flows right now in business. And I'm talking to my accountants and I'm like, something got to give. And this is my next pivot. And because when you're uncomfortable, that's when you challenge the most. And travel is changing. Tulum for a long time, or Mexico for almost 3 years, was the only place that people could travel to. So you got to imagine how many people were coming to my events.
Yeah.
I'm not getting those same numbers this year, 5 years in. My
Mhm.
accountant said, Nubia, you are okay. You're not in the red. There is
Mhm.
money in the bank. People are still
Mhm.
doing. It's just now time you might want to start pivoting and change up a little couple of things. I had to sit down with the gratitude of being able to sustain a business for 5 years straight, to pay my staff, to
Mhm.
live this soft life that I live. I had to stop thinking to myself that something was wrong. I
Yeah.
did everything that I could and I sustained 5 freaking years. That is
Mhm.
amazing. So I'm giving myself now, right? The praise. I don't
And the
need it
grace. And the
great
grace.
and the grace, but I had to sit with that. And now I'm just sitting with, okay, now what's next?
Mhm.
Black in Travel is the expansion to Black in Tulum. I want it to look a certain way. I want it to breathe a certain way. I want it to be wrapped around wellness, wrapped around your more, wrapped around resources. These are not things that are going to make me a millionaire. These are things that I just want people to know that it's possible. You have a community out here of, I specifically speak to millennial and Gen X women of color for the most part,
Mhm.
because that's what I relate to. But I also bring resources of others, 60 plus, others that are in the Gen Z community, others that are, you know what I'm saying, Muslim or just different. It just there's layers on top of layers on top of layers because I'm only one individual.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
I do.
So now, like, I'm really getting involved with IGLTA, the
Hmm.
International Gay Lesbian
Yep.
Travel Association. I'm
Yep.
really getting involved with other organizations in Mexico, EA Mexico. I want to work with other organizations. I've been bootstrapping my business for 5 years. It's
Hmm.
time to do more collaborations,
Yep.
more centered work around how can we reach as many women of color, gay, lesbian, straight, doesn't matter what you identify
Hmm.
as, but that's where I'm at now is the expansion.
It's Nubia, it's from the outsider's perspective, listening to you and knowing you're obviously living in Mexico. I'm here in the States. Now more than ever, we need community.
Absolutely.
And we need community outside of our own country. Like we need to know that we're seen and that we're heard because we see and hear you. We see and hear others, right? And so what I think is so pivotal for you right now is the community's there. They just have to find you. And you have to find that space for them to find you. And that's the part that excites me about you. I have no doubt you're going to create magic. You've been creating magic since 2016. There is something about your energy, for lack of a better term, your passion and your commitment that is so intoxicating. I didn't stop think I think I talked about you for about 3 solid weeks after I left Tulum because I'll be honest, part of me was like, I'll take whatever she's taking because that to me is the life that I want to live. I got myself, and I've had a very amazing career. I launched my company out of nothing as an event person like you. So we share a lot of that in common. I was working for someone else. I was not happy in my job. I was doing something that I loved, but not enjoyed and didn't bring fulfillment. And I was making this person a lot of money, and she was driving around in a Jaguar, and I was driving around in a Honda, and I was doing all the work. And a friend of mine who was in Canada was dating him at the time, and he said, "We need to get you out of there. You need to start your own company." And they basically handed me a check to start my company because they believed in me. And they said, "You have a year to pay it back, no interest." And little did I know that 6 months in, they were going to hand me a project that would launch my career and launch my company. So I paid them back within 6 months, 100%, and my company was launched. And I had this brilliant career. I was given opportunities that I dreamed of. Intentionality. My goal was to produce an event for the Oscars. 2 years in, I was doing Oscars and Golden Globes and SAG Awards. And right, I went to Europe, I went to Africa, I went all of these places. I was doing galas, I was doing fundraisers, I was doing all of the things that I had only dreamed about doing. And it came to a point, if you'll remember, probably like 2008, right? Economic downturn after getting through 9/11, all of those things that we had to muster, we had to gain our courage, we had to work through. Yet we all, those of us who had that kind of tenacity, that entrepreneurial spirit, were able to push through. And then it wasn't until 2012 when things started to change. And I realized that although I loved what I did and I've had an amazing career, I was standing on an event site one day and my client said something that kind of threw me off my game. And I was walking back to my room. I was at one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. And I went to my room and I just burst into tears. And I said, "Is this how I'm going out? Is this my legacy? No one cares what I do. I'm not having that lasting impact. I'm always in a space where I put my heart and soul into something and planning something for a year. And in 24 hours after the event, it's reduced to a pile of sawdust and cut zip ties on the floor." And I needed that tangible touch. I needed something that created that memory for me. And interestingly enough, when I used my psychic, you and I share so much in common we didn't talk about, and she shared about my next chapter, I said, "You are smoking something that I don't want to know because that is just not, how is that going to happen? How am I going to have this life?" And like you, these things started to happen. And I realized very quickly that the more that I was looking for was that sense of legacy. What was that going to be? And so when I came across you in Tulum, it was right at the time where I was like, something's got to change, something's got to give. I need more. I need to be a part of a team that celebrates each other. But I was in a spot where I realized that I wanted to be part of a team that made a difference. And so things started to open up. Companies approached me. Hey, will you freelance for us? I've got these blocks of time. I need someone. Will you help us? And I said, sure, why not? I'll take that opportunity. And what's happened through that transition is I found that community of a company that celebrates its employees and celebrates its team and does events. I got hugged last Saturday as 35 people disembarked from this beautiful resort. It was my White Lotus moment, waving to the guests as they boarded the boat. Every single one of them, men, women, hugged me and said, thank you for being a part of that experience. And I realized this made me get emotional. As that last boat pulled out, I realized I said, this is what it's all about because we created an opportunity for them to experience their own happiness and their own joy. And
That
in
part.
doing, right? And in doing so, you get your life out of that. And so I realized, right? I came home and I went, wow. And then I couldn't wait for this podcast episode. I share all that because life is going to throw you opportunities and circumstances. And if we define ourselves by those circumstances, we're not living our true calling. And
But
so
you
to
also
hear,
gotta sit with it. You sat with it
yes.
and it resonated. That's when you know that you're on the right path. That's when
So
you,
talk, yeah. So talk about that for a second. So in sitting with that, what showed up for you? Like how, with you sitting with that, what showed up?
same thing like you. I was getting people crying on my shoulders, like, thank you. I didn't get my passport until I heard about Black in Tulum.
Yeah.
I heard so many horrible stories about Mexico and never thought about traveling here until I seen that there is actual Black people in a community in Mexico. You see what I'm saying? They
Hmm.
started seeing themselves in me and in my community. I was getting people who reached out and was like, I can't do it no more. I want to get out of America. I'm a DJ. I'm a this. And I said, come on down. Let's try. I have had DJs who moved from the States to Mexico and still work for me.
Well, y'all know how to do your DJs in Mexico. I'm telling you. I mean, you do it differently than we do it here. There's a vibe to it that's very much like I was in Portugal, and every great bar that we went to and restaurant had a DJ spinning the best lounge music, and
Everything. Yeah.
it changes everything. The food tastes better, the people look better. It's just
Well,
fantastic. So y'all
that's
do it right.
is I was getting, I remember a taxi driver one time had pulled up on me and was like, Nubia? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh my gosh. He was like, I'm Daniel. And he was like, can I give you a hug? And I was like, why? And I was like, sure. And he's, no, I just want you to know you changed my life. Black in Tulum gives me so much business. So it wasn't just the clientele, it was the staff, it was the vendors, it was the community. I on my anniversary last year, 4-year anniversary, we allow these Mayan performers to come in to our establishment. The guy, the head of the performance, he comes up to me, tears. Nubia, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to show your people our culture. Thank you for opening the doors for me and my people to come into your place. You understand what I'm saying? That's where I know that what I created is so much more than just an event. It has saved lives. It has made other people's lives that much better. You
Mhm.
get what I'm saying? It really did change the course of Tulum in a way. In a negative sense, people look at it as a negative because they're like, oh, mass tourism. That has nothing to do with me. That's the government. You know what I mean? If you're just allowing people to pour into a place, there's
Mhm.
going to be things that happen. And honestly, I sit with that too. As somebody who loves travel, tourism, and events, I don't like mass tourism and how it
Mhm.
affects a community. So now with Black in Travel, my goal is sustainability. My goal is
Mhm.
wellness. My goal is how can we support? Like I'm really now more on an advocacy side in a sense.
Mhm.
You get what I'm saying? I tell
Yes.
my staff all the time, I'm like, I'm glad that people are having a good time. They're drinking, they're dancing, they're doing all those things, but we are more than just an event. And we always have been. People celebrate their graduations with us, their engagements with us. their bridal parties, bachelor parties. These are milestone, monumental moments of these people's lives that they allow us to share with them.
And what that does once it leaves your establishment is the part that I don't think we recognize because we don't see it. It's not tangible. What happens in your space and that transformational opportunity that you talk about in your on your website, that filters out. It's like the pebble in the pond. So you may never know the conversations that they now have with other people because of the experience. They may not talk specifically about the event, but their transformation then filters out into the world, which transforms others. I say this about teachers. My mom, same thing. She didn't realize the impact she made with her students until Facebook came along.
Yeah.
Because then everybody got to tell her they became a teacher because of her, and they decided not to take their life because of something that she said to them and showed them their value. So those conversations exist outside of what your scope of experience can provide. And that's the part that I like to hold on to as the power. The hugs and the kisses and the cries on the shoulders are great in the moment. But what we have to realize is the empowerment that we send out into the community. I've had the same experience with this podcast. I had someone contact me that I hadn't talked to in probably 15 years. I had no idea the struggles that this person was going through. We dated for quite a while. It was my Canadian boyfriend traveling back and forth. He struggled and he shared with me a story, and he shared with me the conversation that the on the podcast episode that made him stop and look at something a little bit differently, which changed a trajectory for him. I'm not saying I did that. I opened the space like you do with Black and Travel. We open the space for miracles. We open the space for engagement. We open the space for community. And if we don't have that, then we're all just a bunch of lonely, sad people who have nowhere to go and to share and to be seen and to be heard. I was sharing about Puerto Vallarta. When I went there, I was in a tough spot. But the transitional moment was sitting in a drag show with a drag queen called Mama Tits. And she is outrageous and outspoken. And she did this amazing number. She sings, she's got these gorgeous dancers from Mexico. And the last thing she said, and I've shared this multiple times on this podcast, is she said, "My loves, do me a favor, surround yourself with people who celebrate you." And that comment changed my life.
Yeah.
And I realized that there were many people in my life that were not celebrating me. And not in the sense of me being egotistical and narcissistic, celebrate me, but they weren't
Of course.
celebrating who I am in the world. But that's how I held it. I had to unpack that. I had to sit with that statement for a little bit and go, it isn't about telling me how great I am. It's about telling me that I make a difference, that I'm seen and that I'm heard. And I took that on.
Tell you.
Yeah, changed some friendships, right? Got rid of a few people that were a little bit not in that same mode. And what happened is that I found my happiness again. I found the Eric again. I started dating. I started having conversations. I made some new friends. I looked at my career differently. And that's where we find community. And in those moments, it makes that shift, that pivot, almost effortless. Not less scary, but effortless, right? So
Everything worth having is scary.
yeah, it's the fear. That's a whole other podcast in of itself, is the fear and all of it just has
Fear.
us stuck in our own nonsense. You and I could talk forever. I literally just am so happy to have you in my life. I say this with the utmost sincerity. Having people like you out in the world makes this world a better place.
I appreciate it.
And I'm super grateful to you for who you are in the world, for the community that you're creating, for the difference you made for me. Ah, and for that difference that it's made for those that I've shared it with. So I want to thank you for that. I have two final questions for you before we wrap up. Otherwise, we're going to talk until tomorrow. You shared a little bit, but no limitations, pie in the sky. What's next for Nubia Young?
Woo. Eric, I have sat with my accomplishments now over the last almost a decade of me really just making these transitional changes for myself and for others. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is visibility. Like, I really am trying to do as many interviews, podcasts, articles, because you're right. People do need to know what's happening and who I feel like who I am, because I do want the support. I do want to collaborate. I do want to work with, I do want to be seen now in a different tier space. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So I've been working, I hired a publicist, which is not inexpensive at all.
Correct.
So I'm really pouring into me. I'm pouring now more into my more, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, I created the space, it's done what it's done. What's next? I started writing my memoir.
Hmm.
So as soon as I'm looking to launch that by hopefully the top of 2026, I am starting to curate experiences called the soft life. They're called Ori, which is Ori is a word from Yoruba, which is like the head of your life. I want
Mm,
people to,
love.
if you're going to spend money on random stuff, spend it intentionally on yourself. Like I
Mhm.
said, I traveled all these places and it became a blur. I want somebody to show up at a location and not have to touch a damn thing. You
Mm.
understand what I'm saying? At a reasonable budget. Like, you get what I mean?
Mm.
And have this experience that was totally curated for your mental health, your physical health, your just for you to experience the culture, the food, everything in that trip. So when you leave, it will always be something that you remember. So
Okay, you got a year to plan for my 60th birthday, so
I
let's
got
talk
you.
offline and we'll hook me up.
I got you. That's what I want. I want
Yeah.
now everything that we just talked about, I want that to be more intentional. You get what I'm
Mhm.
saying? When I say more, I mean it. So now I'm working on my more. What's the next level to this legacy that I'm building? What's the next level to this empire that I want to build? So I'm working on that and it has all these different, I'm thinking about coming back into podcasting.
You should. You
And
should.
thank you.
You
But I
should.
also want to make sure that I'm devoting the time that I need for me. I've never done pottery. I'm like, I want to do a pottery class. I've never been to Cabo. I just thought to myself, I'm not doing anything Wednesday. Maybe I'll go Wednesday. Just like I want to have that time for me as well. Mine
Mhm.
is always working in work mode. And
Mhm.
sometimes we got to shut that off and just enjoy life. So I also want to make sure I just enjoy life.
You're living your mission, which you even state is to inspire lasting transformation, right?
Yeah,
Showing others that no matter where they start, they can rewrite their narrative. And
absolutely.
you are the true testament to that. And you are the epitome of the just you space of being. And like I said, I'm grateful that you are out in the world. And we're going to post on our social media and through our podcast link where they can find you and learn more about Black and Travel. And I encourage everyone to take a look at your work and Black and Tulum and to stay in contact and to follow you on Instagram. I'm super inspired by you, and my world is a better place having you in it. So, my final question to you is this: if you could go back to that young Nubia as a child, what would you tell her about her life today?
Wow. Those questions are always hard, difficult to answer. If I could go back and talk to the young me, I would tell her that she's beautiful, that she is valued and seen, and to let her know that everything is going to be okay. Just listen to your discernment. You're protected, you're watched, you're going to be okay. Why are you at me crying, Eric?
I told you before we recorded, my last question sometimes lands like this, but it's important because so many of us look back at our experiences as a child and we all have a journey. We all have a story that allows us the opportunity to go back and to say to that person that the circumstances that we went through as children, as difficult as they were and are, that for most, if they can find that space to push through and they can find that conversation to move forward, who they are meant to be will shine.
Yeah,
And you shine. And
thank
the
you.
world needs to know who you are. Oprah, who? I say Nubia. That's what
Listen,
I.
Oprah's about to be auntie, okay? Because she's on my whole vision
Oh,
board. She's been on my
Listen,
for year after year.
I'm just BSing you because it is still my dream. I would drive to Montecito tomorrow to stalk her. She's one of my five. I have five top celebrity guests that I want on my podcast, and I put it up on my social media wall. And it's like her, Ellen, Randy Rainbow, because I love him. So she's at the top of the list. I'm just blowing smoke because I think you're fabulous.
I just
I
want to
think
have lunch with her. That's it.
I want to sit at her home. I want to play with her dogs. I want to talk to her. I want to have a conversation with her. And I just want to be in her space and her presence. But all kidding aside, that's who you are. You're a change maker. She started where she started and changed the world, right? You are doing the same thing, creating community and creating peace and creating love. And I can't wait till our paths cross again. I will collaborate with you in any way possible, anytime, anywhere. I'll
You guys
fly.
heard that. You guys heard that.
Oh,
So
I'm serious. I'm serious. I said you and Zoe and I together would just be like ridiculous on a panel. But I thank you for your time today. I am excited to have my listeners get to know you better. And anytime, you're welcome back. Thanks for being here today.
thank you for having me.
Have a great day. Bye, honey. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on today's episode. I hope our conversation resonated with you like it did me, and I cannot wait to sit down with you all again next week. Remember to subscribe to the Just Do You podcast on your favorite platform so you can make sure not to miss a new episode, which drop every Thursday. If you like what you hear, you can easily share the podcast and episode directly with your friends. And if you would, rate us and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can also follow us on Instagram at Just Do You Pod. As you go out into the world today, remember to just do you. All right, talk next week.